Okay, we're here inside the footwell of the driver's seat. We're going to be going in, looking at the clutch pedal, and then going up to the left of that to find the grommet. This is going to connect into the inside of the wheel well. And after you pull the plastic insert away from the wheel well on the outside of the car, you will be able to see the grommet hole that connects the two parts together. This is a very tight space, so it's going to be hard for me to point this out, but let me try to show you what I've done so far. Alright, great. And I'm just going to grab a pointing device so I can show you where the grommet is. Okay, so the grommet is actually going to be located all the way to the back left here. It is a circular piece. In fact, I think you can see it right there. I'm pushing against it right now. And originally, before you connect the hose, it is completely solid. What you're going to need to do is remove that rubber grommet and drill a hole that is about the same size, if not slightly smaller, than the diameter of your hose. So this is the vacuum hose that's coming from the intake manifold that we showed you earlier. I went ahead and I found a drill bit that was a little bit smaller than this diameter and drilled a hole into the grommet, and then test fitted the hose to make sure that it was a snug fit. Of course, you don't want to make a hole in the grommet that's too big, because that will allow more elements from the outside wheel well to enter the inside cabin. I then ran my vacuum hose inside of here. As you can see, there is no more wire loom protecting the hose. The minute my hose came to the outside grommet in the wheel well, I stopped using that plastic piece. We're inside the cabin where it's much cleaner, and I ran the vacuum hose to here. With my ProSport boost gauge, it did come with a filter, and the filter has a fitting on the right, a fitting on the left. I went ahead and I put the vacuum hose on the right and zip tied it, and continued with the stock vacuum hose that came with my kit on the left. And now we're going to follow the path of this all the way to the dashboard, where we're going to route the boost gauge to our Accelerate dual gauge cluster. So let me show you how to access that part of the wiring next. Okay, so we left off with the vacuum hose continuing from the filter, which you can see right here. And then our goal is now to run it to the top here, where I will have my Accelerate dual gauge cluster. In order to start the wiring, I would go ahead and open this panel first. You can take this plastic removal tool, which I have, and I wrapped it in a thick layer of duct tape to prevent it from scratching the interior. And you can just work your way on the edges here till you get a piece of this open. A lot of times you might be able to just even use your fingernail. There we go. And now it opens up. This has a cavity which connects directly from here down into the footwell underneath. So you can use whatever means you find necessary to route your hose up top. I then installed my boost sensor, which is here. One end of this boost sensor has the wiring, which is going to be going up further to the dual gauge cluster. The other end, which you cannot see because I've already secured it in place, has a barbed fitting on the other side, which you are going to use to connect to that vacuum hose that we left down here. So once you get to the boost sensor, the vacuum hose is done. The wiring of the sensor to the gauge, as well as the wiring of the gauge to the ground and to the mini fuse box, is the next thing to tackle. let's go ahead and discuss how we're going to connect this boost sensor all the way up to the gauge cluster. There is a cavity up here to the left that you can follow, and then we're going to go further inside the cabin. And I'm going to go ahead and secure this to the windshield so the camera's a little bit more steady. And then what you're going to do is remove this plastic piece here. Okay, just like that. Set that guy aside. And then we're going to go ahead and move to the instrument panel. I started on my left and worked my way right. This part is already loosened, but what I did was take this tool again, wedged a little bit out, and then used two hands to remove tabs on the top and the bottom from left to right. There are no screws or anything to detach except some clips. And then this whole piece is going to be removed like that. And this is what the back of the cover looks like. They're just some white clips. None of these are going to get reused with the Accelerate dual gauge cluster. For those of you reinstalling this and simply mounting your gauges to the top, you're going to simply push this back in and snap it in place. So how is the wiring going to get from one place to the other? We left off here where we have our boost sensor. There is a small cavity in here where my index finger is, which will run up into here. And then from here, there is another small cavity that goes through here, and the wiring should come out over here. For this part of the wiring, I strongly recommend getting some pipe cleaners or extra long stiff wire, sticking a long part in here, and then tying your wire to it, and then pulling it through to make it easier to thread. So the next part of this, now that we know where everything is going to go, we have already connected our vacuum hose from the intake manifold into the cabin. From the cabin, we've went to the filter that will collect debris and water. We've already connected that hose to the boost sensor over here. The next thing what we need to do is connect the wiring from here to the gauge, and then connect the gauge to the fuse box and to the grounding. So let's go ahead and see if I have this ready. Okay, so you can see I already have my wiring coming from my boost sensor over here. It runs to here and underneath here. This is what's going to connect to my gauge to tell my gauge how much boost I'm making. So we're not going to connect this to the gauge right now. We're going to go ahead and get the wiring set for the fuse box in the cabin and for the ground.